When I was 27, I relocated to another town for a fresh start at a new firm. Everything seemed to be falling into place. The transition into the new role was seamless, and I managed to secure a modest apartment without much trouble. It was an intimate building, only 8 units in total, 2 per floor. A single creaking staircase climbed the center of the structure, leading to small landings where 2 doors faced each other like silent observers. I took the top floor. The woman living directly across the hall was the one who showed me the place. I gathered she owned a few of the units herself. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, but she existed in a strange middle ground of temperament, neither welcoming nor hostile. She was utterly expressionless. Her voice carried a flat, mechanical monotone, and she seemed entirely indifferent to her own presence. With her unkempt, shaggy hair and a face that looked permanently exhausted, she had a hollow, muted quality about her. But the apartment was solid enough that I chose to ignore the oddity of my neighbor. I figured our paths would rarely cross. I was dead wrong. After my first full shift, I trudged up the stairs at 9:15 in the evening, drained and ready to collapse. I rounded the final landing and stopped short. She was standing there, right outside my door. My brain was too foggy from the long day to process a greeting, and for a moment, we just stood there in the dim hallway light. The silence was suffocating. She fixed me with that same lifeless stare before asking, "Is this the time you usually return?" It was a localized, intrusive question. I stammered a bit, telling her I wasn't sure yet since I'd only just started. She didn't acknowledge a word I said. She simply turned on her heel, stepped into her unit, and threw the door shut with a violent slam. I stood there wondering if I'd offended her or if she was just naturally abrasive. Honestly, I was too exhausted to care. I bypassed dinner and collapsed into bed. Sleep took me instantly, and I stayed under until 5:30 the next morning, when a thunderous pounding on my door jolted me upright. My heart was racing, my mind thick with sleep. The knocking was relentless. I stumbled to the door and swung it open. There she was. In the gray morning light, she looked like a reanimated corpse. "Can I help you?" I managed to croak out. Her lips pulled back into a forced, artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then came the invitation. She wanted me to come to her apartment after I finished work that evening. There was no warmth in the request, just that cold, unsettling monotone. My gut tightened. I wasn't sure if she was suggesting dinner or something else, but every instinct I had told me to decline. I kept it polite, telling her I had a mountain of work to catch up on. Again, no reply. She turned, retreated into her darkness, and slammed the door. Since I was already awake, I started my day early. I headed out to center of the city by 7 and didn't make it back until nearly sunset. To my immense relief, the hallway was empty. I slipped into my sanctuary, locked the deadbolt, and finally breathed. I couldn't wrap my head around her. I wasn't exactly scared yet, just deeply unnerved by the sheer strangeness of it all. I fixed a quick meal and crawled into bed by 11 o'clock, hoping for a night of silence. I had my alarm set for 7, but once again, the violent rhythm of knuckles against wood tore me from sleep. I didn't even have to guess. I dragged myself to the door and swung it open. There she was, the same hollowed-out face, the same dead eyes staring into mine. The truly bizarre part? The conversation was a carbon copy of the day before. The same mechanical request for me to visit her apartment after my shift, the same practiced excuse from my lips. Without a word of acknowledgement, she retreated, and retreated hard, the door echoing with a final, heavy slam. I stood in the hallway, the silence ringing in my ears, feeling a thick layer of unease settling over me. Her total lack of effect made her impossible to read. Was this a neighborly obsession or something more clinical? I stayed awake, forcing down some breakfast before heading into the office. It was another grueling stretch. I didn't clock out until 9, and by the time I pulled into the lot, it was nearly 10. The building was a tomb. No lights in the windows, no movement in the shadows. I hoped that meant she had finally retreated for the night, allowing me to slip into my space unnoticed. I kept my footsteps light on the wooden stairs, holding my breath as I reached the top landing. The hallway was empty. A wave of relief washed over me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my key, and aimed for the lock. But the cylinder didn't turn. It didn't have to. The door was already unlocked. I froze. A cold prickle of sweat broke out across my neck. She was the only person with access to the building's master keys. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation, refusing to believe the situation was as dark as it felt. Surely she wasn't that unhinged. I pushed the door open, noticing a strange, gritty resistance in the handle, but I was too focused on the interior to investigate the hardware. The door clicked shut behind me. The apartment was bathed in shadows, exactly as I'd left it, except for one detail. My bedroom door was standing wide open. I could hear the frantic thudding of my heart against my ribs. I took a few tentative steps forward, peering into the darkness of the sleeping quarters. She was standing right beside my bed. The shadows masked most of her features, but that vacant porcelain stare was unmistakable. "What are you—" The words died in my throat. My eyes flickered down. The blade of a heavy kitchen knife glinted in the low light. Panic spiked. I bolted for the exit. I grabbed the lever and threw my weight against the door, but I nearly fell as it refused to budge. It wasn't just locked, it was jammed tight into the frame. The mechanism wouldn't even rotate. She had rigged the exit. She had trapped me in here with her. In an instant, the terror curdled into a white-hot surge of adrenaline. I wasn't just scared anymore, I was livid. This woman had invaded my home, and I wasn't going to let it end here. She started to approach me, but she was slow, uncoordinated. I intercepted her arm, the sheer force of my momentum catching her off guard. I managed to wrench the weapon from her grip and forced her to the floor. I pinned her there, my breathing ragged, as I fumbled for my phone to dial the authorities. I kept her immobilized until the sirens finally cut through the silence of this area. The officers had her in restraints. The explanation I got later from her relatives was the usual litany of neglected mental health, a history of severe disorders and months of skipped medication, leading to a total break from reality. To them, it was an episode. To me, it was a hunt. Ultimately, I walked away. I handled the situation. But sometimes when I hear a knock at a door in the early morning hours, I still see that emotionless face staring back at me from the dark. It could have ended so much worse. Subscribe and I'll tell you another story the next time you're alone in the dark.